Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf and to a tag video of sorts. Brian from Bookish, I think it's now about 2 weeks ago, as always, I'm late to the party, you know me. He made a video, or he created an original tag called Read Banned Books 2022. And the idea of the tag is really very simple. There is a lot of discussion in the US about states banning books from school libraries, banning books from the school curriculum, and things like that. And Brian, who was a teacher, and is now tutoring in his retirement, but he was a history teacher. And he thought it would be a good idea to feature books that are either on the most recent list of books that are banned, like The Handmaid's Tale, or Toni Morrison's novels, or just any book that you read that has been banned, in order to feature these kind of books and make it clear that banning books is just not a good idea. And I couldn't agree more. Banning books is just wrong on so many levels. I'm not saying that if you are 5 years old, you should read, I don't know, Lady Chatterley's Lover or something. Of course, age-appropriate reading is something that as a parent you have to be conscious about. I'm not a parent, so I'm not going to tell you as a parent what kind of books your child should read. That's up to the parents, and it's up to the teachers for the curriculum, to come up with age-appropriate literature. So I'm not saying age-appropriate as a criterion is wrong, but banning is something else. And don't even talk about burning books. I mean, I'm German. I know what kind of people in my country burn books. So anyway, so the idea, excuse me, the idea behind Brian's tag, and he tagged me, thank you, Brian, is to feature a book that is on a banned books list and talk about it. So that's what I will do to start off. And all the books I mentioned, by the way, are books that are on my 1001 Women to Read Before You Die list. If you're not familiar, I wanted to participate in the challenge that some people do. You buy this book and it says 1001 books you have to read before you die. But all the books out there are featuring 60% male authors, and probably more than 60% white authors, European, Western. So I created my own list. Women only, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, plays. I try to be inclusive with country-wise and everything. Stop babbling about the list. There's a link, the Goodreads shelf. I created a Goodreads shelf, and there's a link down below. So all the books I mentioned in this video are from that list. And to start with a book that has been challenged, and I will leave also a link of classics and modern classics who have been frequently challenged, so you can have a look. And it's quite informative, because it not only tells you about the books, but it tells you exactly when and by whom it has been challenged or banned. And the book that I picked for this is not a recent one, but a modern classic, Chopin, the Awakening. I always pronounce her name in the French way because of the composer. That's probably wrong. Tell me, you American people, how you pronounce her name. She was a 19th century author, and The Awakening, this is a collection. The Awakening is a long short story, and that short story was published in 1899, and it caused quite a ruckus, a riot, because it was about marriage, and it was about a woman who was not happy, also not sexually happy in her marriage. And that was an outrage in 1899, as you can imagine. So the book was banned or challenged back at that time. I find it really interesting to read something like that for us now in 2022 is not even remotely scandalous. Because it shows how times can change. But I also encourage you to read this collection, because it is an author that I feel is underrated. in modern times. So that is my pick for the Read Banned Books 2022 tag by Brian. And Brian, thank you again for drawing our attention to this issue and also for creating the tag and tagging me. But now we're moving on because, as always, I twist tags just so that they serve my purpose. Because I watched a couple of videos doing the tag, and I urge you also to do that. You can find, and if you watch Brian's video, you can find all the people he tagged, and it's like, I would say 20, 30 booktubers, and a lot of them already filmed the video. So go check that out because everybody has not only the books that they present, of course, are different, but how they talk about it. So it's really, really worthwhile. I was sort of triggered by Heidi from My Reading Life, who also made the tag video, and she talked about this approach in Texas, where a Texas official, wrote to the schools and asking about. There's a list of over 800 books, and the criteria for challenging these books is that they cause discomfort in the children, in the reader, and that is not a good idea to feel discomfort because of your race or gender or what have you. And Heidi rightfully pointed out that this is BS. And that I go watch her videos, then she talks about it in her own words. But for me, I felt that art has a lot of purposes, if you will, whether it's paintings or music or books or doesn't matter. Can be entertaining. It can be a comfort. It can be something that just passes your time. So there are a lot of purposes. There's not one purpose for me of art, but one of the most important purposes of art is also that there must be art, not all art, but that there also must be art that challenges you, that makes you feel uncomfortable, that addresses issues that are difficult and hence uncomfortable. And so I looked through my list. That's why I mentioned the list in the beginning. I looked through my list of the 1001 books by women that you have to read before you die. And I picked a couple that are really beyond the comfort zone of most people, certainly me. And I feel that is the purpose of the book, not gratuitous, that you are left, uncomfortable, but it's a purpose. And the first one I want to mention is a modern classic. And of course, I forgot the date it was published. Let me check. 1984. And that is Kathy Acker, Blood and Guts in High School. It's a slim little book. I read this, I think last year or the year before last, together with Adam. Kathy Acker was born in 1947, and unfortunately she died of cancer when she was only 50 in 1997. She was a multiple medium artist, not only a writer, but she was also a writer. And this is the story of Janie, is that how you pronounce it? Who we follow from a very young age, just 12 or something, until later in her life. And it's just, yes, not easy to read. It's about sexual abuse, when she was a very young child, but it's not what makes this book so uncomfortable. It is written from Janie's perspective, and she talks about it. I had sex with the friend of my father, and the way she talks about it is not accusatory. Because then it's still discomforting or uncomfortable to read about sexual abuse, but it makes it extremely uncomfortable if the person talking about it talks about it as if you just had, a tuna melt sandwich for lunch, and it's the most natural thing. So she's not complaining, quote unquote, about it, but she's talking about it. And it goes on and on and on into her imprisonment and working as a forced prostitute. But it has a purpose. The violence and the depiction of a woman's life, how her body is used and how we look away, is that is the purpose of the book. So it is definitely uncomfortable, but it is a really, really necessary book to read. The next one, and again, I have to look up the dates. I am so prepared. The next one is translated fiction, also a slim little book, Adania Shibli, Minor Details, translated from the Arabic by Elizabeth Jacquet, which I really like that translator. She translated 13 Months of Sunrise, which I read last year. So she's I like the way her English sounds. I can't judge whether she's a good translator. I should say that because I can't read the original. But anyway, the author was born in 1974. She's a Palestinian author, and this book in Arabic was published in 2007, and the English translation in 2017. And I think I mixed up the numbers. Of course, I mixed up the numbers. The original 2017 and the English translation 2020. I'm sorry about that. It's a book told in two timelines. It's an incident that happened during the Palestine-Israeli conflict in the 1940s. And then in our time, a woman, a reporter, a researcher who is investigating that incident. I'm just looking at some fly who's, yes, Doris, I still have fruit flies. Not as many anymore, but I still have them. Anyway, so she is investigating this cold case, so to speak. There is, if you want to talk in trigger warnings, rape, murder, violence of all types, but it is about, at the core, of course, this decade long conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, and what it means in terms of violence for normal people, especially women. Again, it's not easy to read because in the beginning you will realize there's a build-up to something, to an event that you probably don't want to read about, but this has a purpose. The fact that you feel uncomfortable has a purpose, because we should all feel uncomfortable if we read about a conflict like that and about the violence, and we shouldn't be numb just because we scroll the Twitter news and, you know, there's another incident somewhere in the Middle East that's far away. Ukraine, who cares, you know, what happened to Ukraine? So this is, I can certainly recommend this book if you're interested in that type of book and in the politics involved in the book. The next one is also translated fiction, and it was, I would say, I read it, I think it was not last year. No, I read it the year, did I read it the year before last? Yes, I think so. 2020, yes, when it came out. It came out in 2020, but maybe I should show you the book. It's Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Basterica, an Argentinian writer, and translated from the Spanish by Sarah Moses, and published in 2020 in the English translation, and 2017 in the Spanish original. It is kind of a futuristic novel. I wouldn't call it sci-fi. It's more a dystopian society built upon our society. So the premise is that there has been some cataclysmic event and we have a shortage of animals, especially the animals that we eat. Humans were not affected by that virus, so they are still around in big numbers, but we don't have any meat anymore to eat. And the solution of the government is to produce, quote unquote, human meat. So people who are cloned, produced in the real sense of the word, to be eaten, to be meat. And we follow one person who has a role in this, in the controlling of the meat producing industry, and he gets a present, a young female, as a treat, because that tender is the flesh of the young female, and then the story takes off from there. And of course, it is a big accusation, j'accuse, against the meat industry in our times. If you read this book and you're still able to eat meat, I don't know what's wrong with you. I thought it was brilliantly done. It was harrowing. It was horrible. It was discomforting. It was uncomfortable, but it definitely served a purpose. And it, for me at least, I think it achieved the purpose. So I can absolutely recommend it, but don't, order a burger just before you read this. Wouldn't do it if I were you. And the last one, again, I have to look up the exact publication date. That's just me in this video. Is one of my all-time favorite books, but an uncomfortable read, and that is The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell, published in 1996. This is also set in the future. Again, I wouldn't call it sci-fi, but it is set in the second half of the 21st century, so not that far in the future anymore, but it was in 1996. So the book opens in 2059. And we learn that there is this main character, Emilio. He is a Jesuit monk, a priest, and he is the only survivor of a space mission to a faraway planet that happened a couple of years before, and something went horribly wrong there. Yes, there was Jesuits involved in that mission for reasons explained in the book, but also scientists, biologists, anthropologists, and so on. And the book tells us when we first encounter Emilio, we only know that he is broken physically. He has horrible, horrible injuries. The use of his hand, not possible. But also, of course, mentally he is broken. And then we learn what happened to him and his fellow, his crew. And it's about colonialism. It's about encountering a different culture and meaning no harm, but doing all the wrong things, and the repercussions that it has or can have in this book for the people from Earth coming to the new culture. But of course, it's also about the influence that it has on the other culture if you talk about colonialism. The violence that Emilio encounters and what is done to him for him to have come back that broken is, you don't want to talk about it. So it's definitely an uncomfortable read, but it tells you something about what happens if you go about and try to, push your worldview on somebody else, and the misunderstandings and the horrible consequences these misunderstandings have. So I think it's a fantastic book. I don't reread it as often because of the violence in the book, but I can certainly recommend it. So those were, 4 books of discomforting reads, and 1 book that actually has been challenged and banned for you to read. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching. Spread the word about reading banned books. You can also post a picture on Instagram, for instance, if you don't have a channel, or you can, do something on Twitter. I'm not gonna tag anybody because anybody who listens, watches this, and wants to engage, please do so. And I'm looking forward to your comments, of course, as always, and I'll see you all soon in the next one.